is chapter 2 in Mattathias. Now remember, in St. Luke's Gospel, I told you that the genealogy of Jesus goes to Mattathias. Mattathias is the Jew that begins this Jewish revolt against the Greeks that Alexander the Great had brought in. And so we call this Mattathias' great lamentation to God for what has been going on in the city of Jerusalem and of the temple. So with chapter 2, I will read for you, starting with verse 14. And Mattathias and his sons rent their garments, and they covered themselves with haircloth and made great lamentation. And they were sent from King Antiochus. And Antiochus is the pagan ruler that deconsecrated the temple. So there's about to be a fight with the Maccabean family and Antiochus. And many of the people of Israel consented and came to them, but Mattathias and his sons stood firm. And they went, and there they were sent from Antiochus answering, and said to Mattathias, Thou art a ruler and honorable and great man in this city, and adorned with sons and brethren. I'm going to move forward now to 1 Maccabees 2. We're going to move now into the last words of Mattathias in verse 49. Now the days drew near that Mattathias should die, and he said to his sons, Now have pride and chastisement gotten strength in the time of destruction and the wrath of indignation. Now therefore, O my sons, be zealous for the law, and give your lives for the covenant of your fathers. So we can see right here that Mattathias' deathbed, he's telling his 5 sons, have zeal for the law, because this is the fulfillment of the covenant. John chapter 2, when Jesus went and cleansed the temple, they remembered, zeal for the law. So we can make this connection between the book of Maccabees and the Gospel of St. John. So now we're going to talk about that actual cleansing of the temple. And that is in 1 Maccabees chapter 4, beginning with verse 36. This is where it gets very, very interesting. 1 Maccabees chapter 4, verse 36. And this is all in your handout. Then Judas and his brethren said, Behold, our enemies are discomforted. Let us go and now cleanse the holy places to repair them. And all the army assembled together, and they went up into Mount Zion. And they saw the sanctuary desolate, and the altar profaned, and the gates burnt, and the shrubs growing up in the courts as in a forest, or on the mountains. And the chambers joining to the temple were thrown down. And they rent their garments, and made great lamentation, and put ashes on their heads. And they fell down to the ground on their faces. And they sounded with a trumpet of alarm, and they cried towards heaven. Then Judas appointed men to fight against them that were in the castle, till they had cleansed the holy places. And he chose priests without blemish. In other words, they were celibate. And he uses the word blemish. In the Latin, it's immaculate. He chose priests who were without blemish, whose will was set upon the law of God. And they cleansed the holy places, and took away the stones that had been defiled into an unclean place. And he considered about the altar of holocaust that had been profaned. What should he do with it? And a good counsel came into their minds to pull it down, lest it should be a reproach to them, because the Gentiles had defiled it, so they threw it down. And they laid up the stones in the mountain of the temple in a convenient place, till there should come a prophet and give answer concerning them. Well, who's the prophet they were waiting for to tell them what to do? Jesus. And what did Jesus tell them what to do? Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. So Jesus is coming in and answering the question that they're wondering to know. What do we do with this temple that we're cleansing? They took the whole stones according to the law, and built a new altar according to the former. And they built up the holy places and the things that were within the temple, and they sanctified the temple and the courts. And there they made holy vessels and brought in the candlestick and the altar of incense and the table into the temple. And they put incense upon the altar and lighted up the lamps that were given with the candlestick, and they gave light in the temple. And they set the loaves upon the table and hung the veils and finished all the works that they had begun to make. And they arose before the morning on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is the month of Chislev, in the year 148th year. And they offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar of holocaust which they had made, according to the time and according to the day wherein the heathens had defiled it. In the same way it was dedicated anew with canticles and harps and lutes and cymbals. And all the people fell upon their faces and adored and blessed up to heaven him that had prospered them. And they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days, and they offered holocaust with joy and sacrifice of salvation of praise. And they adorned the front of the temple with crowns of gold and escutcheons, and they renewed the gates and the chambers and hung doors upon them. And there was exceeding great joy among the people, and the reproach of the Gentiles turned away. And Judas and his brethren and all the church of Israel decreed that the day of the dedication of the altar should be kept in its season from year to year for 8 days, from the 25th day of the month of Chislev, with joy and gladness. I don't know about you, that sounds like a Catholic Mass. Now, the key point here on the day is the 25th day of the 9th month. Remember, this is the Hebrew calendar. When the Gregorian calendar came in, it had actually changed that 25th day to December the 25th. So this is here. This is that precursor, that last feast, that last sign of this cleansing of the temple that points us to the birth of the Messiah. So now we're going to tie in the Immaculate Conception. How does the Immaculate Conception tie into what we're talking about? First, I must read from you on 2nd Maccabees, because what the author of 2nd Maccabees is going to bring to our attention is when Jeremiah had taken the Ark of the Covenant, the tabernacle, the altar, and the scriptures, and had taken them up to Mount Nebo and to hide them, because he was hiding them from the enemies, and we're waiting for a sign from God what to do with these sacred elements. So let's see if we can unfold the mystery here.